right, and of course it's all about the high cost of living, and of course we're trying to understand how did we get here in the first place, and is it a little too late to stabilize the economy? But of course the question that we asked you is what should be done, that is to ease the high cost of living currently witnessed in the country. Once again, what should be done to ease the high cost of living currently witnessed in the country? And is Ukraine war really to blame for what is going on in the country? Lots of questions, and of course we'll be looking to find answers to the same. And of course joining us today is Raphael Matu, who is an economist. Thank you very much, Raphael, for joining us. How are you this morning? You're well.
Thank you for having me.
All right, karibu sana. And of course, before we delve into the conversation, let's get to hear what a section of Nairobi residents had to say as far as the high cost of living and what needs to be done to ease the measures.
Ni lazima basic commodities ipande ikiwa kama mafuta imepanda. Kama mafuta imepanda, imetinga kila kitu yote inapanda. Kwa hivyo maisha imekuwa mangumu Kenya kwa sababu ya vitu kwa zinatoka nje na kama tujitegemee kama nchi. Kama vile mfano Tanzania, ukienda mahali kama Uganda, mambo kama chakula hawana shida naye kwa sababu wameweka mambo kama agriculture iko na food security. Lakini Kenya inakuwa ni free market.
Kama maisha iko juu, shida ile tuko nayo hapa ni heavy taxation na double taxation. Hii vitu tax ile inawekewa iko both direct na indirect. Sasa ile imepanda na pia sisi lazima tupandishe. Pia bei ya kitu kama mafuta ikienda juu ina affect transport ile inaileta nayo hapa, na hiyo lori inaleta hiyo vitu hapa. Hiyo transport yote inamwagika, the end product ni bei ya hata hii biscuit lazima iende juu. Bei ya sukari ikienda juu, kila kitu ile hapa inaenda juu. Bei ya maziwa ikienda juu, sisi tukiongezewa na sisi lazima tuongeze. Kama wameongeza 5, tunaongeza 5 kwa hii ingine.
Maisha ya Kenya imepanda sababu hii katiba ilikuja kufinyilia mtu ambaye ni wa chini. Sababu kitu ya kwanza, viongozi ni wengi sana na pesa ambayo inatumika kulipa hawa watu mingi ya hii pesa ni ya mkopo. So unapata mtu wa chini ndiye anafinyilika sababu watu wengi, especially wacha niseme upande wangu, kama mimi ni mchanga pia, lakini kwa saizi kazi ndio hiyo hakuna. So unapata maisha inakuwa magumu.
System of governance in Kenya inafanya gharama za maisha inakuwa changamoto kubwa kwa wananchi wa kawaida. Na unless waangalie jinsi wanaweza fanya structure of politics isi affect mwananchi wa kawaida, because in Kenya everything is politics, everything. Hata wameibeba wakaweka kwa kanisa. Kanisa pia siku hizi imekuwa siasa. So as long as young people like me, I will be motivated inside politics, sitafanya ile kitu inaitwa production. Sababu mimi I have to produce something to sell, ndio hiyo commodity ikue Kenya. Lakini saa hii hata toothpick Kenya wana import kutoka China. Toothpick ambapo mwananchi wa kawaida kama mimi naweza innovate na nitengeneze na niweke kwa market, inatolewa nje ya nchi. Mafuta saa hii sijui wanatuambia sijui inatoka Ukraine. Ati Ukraine vita iko, mafuta saa hii inapanda. So if Kenyans like me, young people, will not be persuaded wakuwe productive kwa nchi hii, waanze kumambo ya siasa representative, what are everybody presenting?
All right, very angry Kenyans, you know, over what's happening, and of course what the guy is saying. Mafuta inatoka Ukraine, and of course that is a question on so many people's lips right now.
Yes.
You know, the fact that there is war in Ukraine, how does that then affect us as a country? And of course we'll get to understand that, you know, and much of course during that conversation. But the big question is then again, the high cost of living. You know, when we talk about this, because it's something that we usually talk about, and especially since the better part of last year, of course, going all the way to now, where we are at, where of course the situation has worsened, right? What exactly do we mean by high cost of living, and how do we measure that?
Thank you once again. I think when you talk about high cost of living, generally we are looking at an increase in prices for most goods and services, and more or less what we call as inflation.
All right.
So it is not an increase in the price for one commodity. Generally, most commodities, especially for the consumer goods, they seem to be on the rise at the same time. So I think we'll be able to look at the consequences, or maybe what are the causes. But how do we measure that?
Yeah.
We pick a set of goods, maybe which are commonly consumed by Wanjiko, and we put them in what in economics we call as a basket.
All right.
So maybe you may have sugar, you may have like fuel, you may need to look at things like paraffin, cooking fat, and so forth. A set of goods. And when you put them in a basket, then of course we're able to compute how have the prices changed over time.
Yeah.
Normally what we normally call as a consumer price index. Kwa
Okay.
hivyo hiyo index inatuonyesha venye prices zinaenda.
All right.
It's
And
a
of
very
course,
important thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
to really understand. Of course, now it's like everything has actually gone up.
Yeah.
From milk, right? Things that generally we would buy at what, 45 shillings, now it's all the way, you know, going up to almost 60 shillings,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the price of bread, again, all the way to around 70 shillings. And people are asking, what is going on? What is causing all those things?
So I think there are multiplicity of factors that we need to bring on board, which forces the prices to go up.
Yeah.
I think I've just seen a mention about war in Ukraine. It's unfortunate, but I think maybe probably coming to make a scenario that is already bad to become worse.
Okay.
Because even before war on Ukraine, of course, the prices for goods and services were still rising.
Yeah.
So normally, from an economic perspective, we look at either factors which are demand-driven. When you say demand-driven, meaning that there is more than normal demand for goods and services. And again, there could be quite a number of issues which can lead to an increase in the demand, which I think we will be able to discuss as we move forward. Or maybe the factors which are supply-driven, where the supply for goods and services happens to be lower than what is being demanded in the market, and consequently pushing up the prices up. So having said that, then I think, one, we are really going through quite a terrible time, especially in terms of drought. We thank God now rains have started coming in, and it's a good thing. And you realize that being an agricultural economy, so the fact that we have been going through drought, that is a key factor to push the prices, especially for the agricultural products. We need, of course, to look into other issues, like we still yet to recover fully from COVID, as the report said, and giving us serious implications in terms of the disruptions that we had most on the supply side, on the production, on maybe the inputs of imports of raw materials and so forth. So I think there are some things which still need to get back to normal, which we are still yet not there.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe the interruptions on the supply side by COVID, we cannot, of course, forget the high cost of fuel, which has been a debate, I think, for the last 1 or 2 years. And the high cost of fuel, again, brought in by quite a number of factors. Do we need to look at our taxation, especially VAT on fuel prices? It goes without saying, when we touch on fuel, we touch almost in any other part of the economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and above that, we should also think about the exchange rate. So how is our shilling performing in relation to the dollar? So if you look at our shilling, it's been weakening, and when we talk about a weak shilling, that means that most of the things that we're importing, they become relatively quite expensive as they come in. And again, if we don't import and we opt to buy locally, then the demand for local goods rises, and consequently pushes us the prices.
So demand and supply,
so we have a multiplicity of prices. So as we talk about war in Ukraine, is already coming in a scenario that it was already ongoing.
Yeah. And of course, I think in March around 15th thereabout, we had, you know, the State House spokesperson, that is Kanzedena, saying, listen, the war on Ukraine has not only brought, you know, the impact has not only been felt in the country, but also, you know, everywhere else. But then again, of course, the Ukrainian embassy in the country, you know, actually tweeted back and said, no, we are not the ones to blame for the high cost of living, especially right now in the country. So we're left to wonder, where are we? But like you said, you know, the war on Ukraine came at a time where, of course, the country, we were badly affected, and that is by high cost of living. So can we just understand for example, if we say the war on Ukraine, of course, we all understand we also have like our own domestic causes for the same, which again we'll still look at. But when we say the war on Ukraine, explain to common mwananchi how the war in a totally different continent has actually affected us, that then again, we're buying sugar at a very expensive price, or basic commodity like milk and bread. They're very, very expensive. How does that, trickle down?
We need to understand as we progress in the world, we are now in a really global economy, or rather more or less what we call as a global village. So what is really happening in any other country in the world, to a great extent, is likely to have great implications into what is really going on. Remember that Russia, Ukraine, as we talk about that zone, there's a lot of implications regarding fuel, and consequently, we are not saying maybe probably they may have stopped supply, but what happens in economics is that again, there comes in quite expectations. There are expectations that maybe because we have the crisis going on, maybe prices will go on. So, so the people's reactions to such kind of crisis, and maybe others maybe trying to hold maybe what they already have, maybe even other countries, so that maybe in anticipation that the crisis may even become worse. So such scenarios are likely to push the prices for fuel automatically up. In addition to that, also remember that we trade with other countries, so we buy, we sell to them, and consequently, when we are in a war crisis, definitely we admit that their supplies, the supply chains are totally disrupted, and whatever maybe we buy from them, we may not really be able to import in the right quantities, and consequently shortages come in and they will automatically push us the prices. So like it's not just in terms of fuel, but also in terms of commodities, or even in terms of the goods we buy, or even at times also selling to them, meaning that they may also not be able to buy our goods.
All right, and of course we also import wheat from them, so then of course that becomes a challenge, getting them into the country.
You see that is likely, and wheat and unga, of course, is very basic to our meal on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
So consequently, if we are not able to get sufficient supplies from them, automatically the prices go up, and locally again, so people will ask, why not buy the local supply? So the question would be, is the local supply sufficient? And even if maybe probably the local supply is sufficient, given the fact that we have disrupted a reasonable quantity of imports for the same product, automatically the prices will go up. Either due to that increased demand of the local product, or consequently even the local suppliers at some point may also wish to
increase the prices.
Enjoy the prices when it lasts.
Again, because the demand is quite high. So of course we need to do like a proper balancing act, right? As a country, which again sometimes that is a very big issue, you know, as a country, especially when it comes to like policy issues, which again we'll be looking at as we continue with the discussion. And also, can we just first of all go back to pre-COVID? How was our economy? How were we doing? And then COVID, and now, and even as we're heading into the general elections, how is our economy doing?
So I think when you talk about how the economy is doing, I think it depends on what kind of dimensions that we are looking into, but maybe for now, maybe we are talking about prices. I want to go back maybe probably to 2017. You remember we had an issue with unga. I don't know whether we were calling it as the unga revolution or something. And at some point, the government was forced to step in and subsidize the suppliers of unga, and we had to buy unga at 90 shillings.
But that didn't last long, did it?
Why it could not last long is that at times, I think maybe going back again, let me clarify and say that the Kenyan economy is mainly a free market economy in terms of the fact that our production of the government no longer directly controls the prices for goods and services. You know, those early days we would wait for the budget and the government would fix the prices for unga, the prices for sugar, the prices for tea leaves, the prices for beer, cigarettes. So the role of the government now is purely can only affect prices through policy and not through direct price controls.
Okay.
Because in a free market, when you try to push into direct price controls, they have serious repercussions. Like you realize when you say unga was supposed to go down to 90 shillings, we almost stayed a whole 1 month without taking ugali because there was no unga. And remember that there was a subsidy, it was not really a price control. So price controls becomes quite very difficult. You can see like the only part we have partially price control is in the fuel industry. And again, still comes with its own complications. So therefore, if you look at how we were doing that pre-COVID, we cannot say we did not have challenges. Because definitely it brings in the other concept of why rise in VAT in terms of basic commodities, because I think VAT in basic commodities came in before COVID. But again, it's a very delicate balance for the government between revenue mobilization and social welfare, where you are trying to protect on one side, and on the other side you have to try to mobilize revenue, and especially as we talk about high levels of debts, and we have huge debt obligations to address.
And of course, one person actually from you know, the feedback that we were getting, especially some of the Nairobi residents were like, the debt is too high. And that is why we're feeling, you know, the pinch. But then again, when you say the government's, again, lost control, especially as far as pricing is concerned, do you think that is where the rain started beating us? And of course, translating to what we're experiencing right now?
No, not really, because I think what happens is that we tend to look at a free system, a free market, to be far much better, of course, than government-controlled system. Or rather, to be precise, the two economic models, they have their own challenges. When you talk about the government regulating almost everything in the economy, it brings in a lot of inefficiencies, and maybe at times the consequences may be much worse than maybe what we are going through. When you also talk about the free system, it has its own weaknesses, and we have been talking about like monopolies in the economy. We have been talking about cartels, and that is why partially we need a bit of regulation, and maybe I think that is where policy issues come in. What kind of policies have we put in place to make sure that we caution the consumers, we also caution the producers, because remember they are also going through quite a hard time. They are also experiencing the same challenges, and like I said, especially when the challenges or the inflation are from the supply side, automatically the producers are going through a hard time, and they carry on the burden to the consumer
as well. All right, so of course we also want to understand, so then who is responsible for all these policies, and why are they not doing what they are supposed to do? Or if they are doing, then is it not enough to make sure that then again, you know, the consumer is somewhat cushioned, you know, like we said earlier on. All right, let's take a look at some of the feedback as far as the question of the day. And what we asked is, what needs to be done to ease the high cost of living currently witnessed in the country? A number of you had a lot to say, so let's take a look at what you had to say. And of course, Fred Osumo says reduce politicians' salary to be less than 150,000 shillings. And of course, the money deducted is for it to go to food so that we can get energy and of course fight the remaining battles. All right. And of course, let's get to hear what someone else has to say. This is Joseph Kanyi, who says vote in government that is willing to work for the people. All right. Governance issue. And then someone else says, number 1, reduce taxes on basic household items. Number 2, support agriculture to boost food production. That is fertilizer subsidies, and of course, and irrigation and so forth. And then number 3, support mass employment sector to keep in as many people as possible at work, agriculture, tourism, and construction, transports, and so forth, and of course peaceful elections as well. And of course, I'd like to stick to that conversation, that tweet in just a moment. Of course, we'll come back to it. And then Gabriel Wamaya says to vote people who are God-fearing leaders who are not led by their stomach, like those who are in this government and who don't care about the people. Again, a question of governance issue comes in. And then Victor says we can only attribute the cost of living to internal factors. For example, it is global, and of course, it's ongoing instability in the world due to war. Of course, sanctions. There's also an aspect of climate change, blackmail, instability in fuel prices, and so forth. And of course, this have contributed heavily into the rising cost of living. So, of course, a lot, that is going on really, as far as high cost of living. And then someone else says promoting local production rather, and of course minimizing the level of imports, and this will make the currency stronger. All right, lots, people have to say. What do you have to say to the same?
Yeah, so I think I agree with most of the suggestions which have been given there. I agree, of course, I agree the problem is global. I think this morning I was trying to read a report from Ghana. I was also trying to follow up what really happened in Britain, and I think especially, the fuel prices in Britain were almost double. But I think someone has also talked about tax cuts, maybe probably on fuel and basic commodities. I think, according to the report, I think they were able to do that in Britain, especially on fuel. Increasing production, and then, of course, matters of food security, very, very crucial, so that we can become sustainable. We need to understand that, as we said, we are in an agricultural economy, and most of the challenges we have especially goes to foodstuffs. And like during the COVID time, luckily, I think we did not have drought. I think because you could try to imagine if when COVID hit, it was like what we are going through now. I think things could have been a bit difficult. Agricultural sector is quite a unique sector and has its own usually serious challenges, and that is why the prices in agriculture are usually very, very unstable, because unlike the industrial sector, you realize that output in agriculture is highly unpredictable. In an industry, you can say, I'll be producing 1,000 units in a day. In agriculture, when we plant and we do the weeding and everything, so at times we wait and for the nature and things to happen. So I think that is why we are saying we need to adopt better agricultural methods, which do not necessarily have to depend on rainfall or maybe just seasons. We need to make sure that we have good storage, because again, we waste a lot. You realize that when we have bumper harvests, most of the products at times they go to waste. We have better storage and better ways of preservation of these foods. They can really be made available when we have shortages, and that maybe probably would really go to really stabilizing the prices of the products. We have to address issues in terms of also the cost of production, because you'll ask, why are we importing even things like wheat, very basic things like maize? Probably our local cost of production has also gone high. So we need to understand what is it that is pushing the cost of production high, so that most people, even those who are doing dairy farming, will go for their raw materials for their feeds, maybe from outside rather than buy what is locally available. And when I think we move around all those issues, you realize they go back to policy issues, and someone has talked about governance. So it goes back. What kind of leaders do we bring in place? And most of the main role they play in terms of legislation and the role they play in terms of oversight. So even as we blame the government, even as we blame the leaders, maybe probably as voters, we take the biggest responsibility. And especially it's very important to state this as we move towards elections, that we need to be sober as we make the votes. Let's vote people who believe in what they say, people who have the qualifications to make the right decisions, and people who have the right experiences. Because remember, these guys, as they make the laws, as they do oversight, as they sit in various committees, they will be, there's a committee on agriculture, there's a committee on,
so many
investments, there's a committee in, so many of them in education. So there's no way we'll expect good policies in agriculture, in education, and many other areas, manufacturing, if the kind of people we select, maybe through excitement or through hype, you know, is not somebody who can even be able to make a simple policy. Maybe when some of these proposals are made, even at times we lobby through like NGOs and other forums. These people cannot really be able to push these policies in Parliament. So our elected leaders, as we go to elections and as we bring our leaders up on board, moving forward as a long-term solution, let's rethink the kind of leaders that we're electing. We put in place,
I mean, and there's so many Kenyans who will tell you, but then again, that is like a very tricky place that sometimes we as a people who vote are forced to be, because this person comes and promises that, yes, we'll deal with, you know, all the issues that is affecting the agriculture sector in the country. We'll also look into manufacturing. We'll look into this. We'll look into that. And you believe them, right? Yeah. And you vote for them. And then once they get into power, I don't know, something just happens, you know, in between. That is, either they forget what they told us, or they were simply just giving us empty promises. So it's like, then where does that leave the people who vote?
So I think even as we get promises from politicians, most of them usually they are not, most of them are not really first time people who are coming and asking for votes and who are looking for positions. So there are people we can be able to look at their qualifications, and there are people we can be able to look at their track records, and there are people we can be able to look at their commitments towards making our life better. So do they believe in what they say? Do they implement what they really say? So I think that is very, very important. And especially most people who are informed, perceive, I may say, that you have some abilities to make judgments. You have take time to articulate issues. Take time to be analytical. Don't just move because the wave is moving, or because of excitement. A lot of people are talking about
it is very,
very important. People who have a level of understanding of some of these things. Please, let's be very analytical as we make our decisions, because we are the people who can be able to move things forward as voters.
That who should hold them accountable? Because you see, once they get to power, sometimes it's difficult to even get to them. You'll talk to so many Kenyans and tell you, listen, I cannot even get access to my member of parliament. I cannot get access to my MCA. So then holding them accountable becomes somewhat a problem. So who should do this?
So accountability comes in mainly, especially through the vote. And as we have said, there is no reason why someone you voted and came up with a lot of promises or had given you so many promises comes back after 5 years and
still ask for the same vote.
And maybe probably vote them. The other thing is also, if you look at our new constitution and you also look at the structure, especially for the public finance management, it gives a lot of provisions even for Wanjiku, not just at the national level, but also at the county levels, especially through what we call as public participation, because you realize that most people, again, there are these forums where you're supposed to go air your views, where you're supposed to go make your contributions, and they are normally open to public. But you realize that most people really don't give time to these forums and these what is given to them by the Constitution, which is the right to go and make contributions and to go and air their views and so forth. So you realize that most of it, then the decision goes back to the police stations, and the decision, they are left at the leeway of maybe probably making some of these choices, which may not necessarily be the correct choices.
All right. And of course, coming back to, and I like what you're saying, it's very easy for us to point fingers for a very long time. We always say the government is not doing this, the government is not doing that. But like what you're bringing in is, how about we check ourselves as a people and get to understand what role do we play to make sure that we are where we are today, and that is experiencing really, really high, prices for the basic commodities that we should be having. So check ourselves first and then blame the government or the leaders in general. But then again, let's also address, the aspect of legislators, members of parliament, because they're the ones who approve some of those things. For example, a tax. And the question is, why, right? And do they sometimes consider common wananchi, or is it more of personal interest to see what can I gain from this, what can I gain from that, and how then does this, come down to affect the common wananchi? Because then they can afford some of those things. Yeah. If anything, they don't see it as a big deal. But then against the common wananchi who's suffering from the same.
So I think when we are dealing with politicians, is a bit, I don't know, do I call it fishy? Because at times, quite a number of them, they really do what we call as double speak. And when they go to the public, they will tell the public what they want to hear. Maybe when we go to parliament, we do something which is totally very different. But remember, like I said earlier, is at times quite a delicate balance between social welfare, or maybe trying to protect the common mwananchi, and also the revenue mobilization of the state. You have to look at the revenue needs of the state. So, and the funny part about, especially about economic policies, is that at times they really act the opposite of what maybe the common mwananchi really trying to understand. You find that at times the governments really target basic items, maybe like foodstuffs and things like fuel. Traditionally, we used even to tax beer almost every time there was a budget, beer, cigarettes, and so forth. And the reason is that when you are looking to tax, of course we tax for many reasons, and when you're taxing for revenue purposes, you need to look at those commodities whereby when I target this commodity, then my tax is guaranteed.
Okay.
Right? All right? So normally some things we normally say that they're inelastic, or rather they're insensitive to changes in prices. So in real sense, in real planning, it is unfortunate those are the commodities which are best for taxation, because when you have taken a cup of tea, there was sugar in it, there was milk in it, maybe there was a cake, so there was unga in it. So they're the best commodities in terms of revenue
guaranteed, like you said. And,
at times you have to understand, so there is that element of understanding. This is how maybe things are supposed to work. This is how things are supposed to go. But again, you have to look on the other side. So most of, especially the less developing countries, then they find themselves cornered, because you are trying to balance between people who are living in the extreme, because they are the people who are depending mainly on those basic commodities, and the other side where some of these basic commodities happens to be the very best for revenue generation.
All right. How about we take a break? And of course, when we come back, we'd also want to understand, so fine, a lot of people have resorted to kadogo economy, right? How is that sustainable, for the people? And of course, there's also an aspect of counter accusations, and especially right now, campaigns are ongoing, they're saying this, and then this other party says this other things. So then, and the question of then what do we need to do to make sure that then we try to survive now, as we look for ways that we can somewhat like bring down the prices, especially for the basic commodities. But keep tweeting at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. You want to call in? Again, feel free to do so. The numbers are down on your screen, and let's just find solutions or get to understand how best we can bring the prices of some of these basic commodities down. Stay with us. This is Your World. We're taking a short break. See you soon.
Toss White hutoa madoa kutoka nguo za rangi kama red, yellow, blue, yani kala zote. Lakini ni specialist wa kutoa madoa kutoka nguo za white. There's the Toss for every laundry need. Toss ya tosha.
Come view our vast array of high-quality projects nestled in the upcoming controlled Tatu City, ranging from 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, offering an ultra-modern, all-inclusive lifestyle for all. See you there.
We teach, inspire, and transform young minds to achieve their fullest potential. Welcome to our Raka campus and also the new campus along Eastern Bypass. Enroll today at Royal Brain School Executive Kindergarten and Primary School, a unique and executive school where the future begins.
Maziwa kamili asili ya Kenya.
All right, welcome back. Glad to stay with us. This is Your World, and today it's all about the high cost of living. How are you feeling, first of all, as a Kenyan? How have you been impacted? And of course, what do you think needs to be done to ease the high cost of living? And of course, what we are witnessing right now in the country. And of course, that is the question of the day today. And that is, what do you think needs to be done to ease the high cost of living currently witnessed in the country? Once again, what should be done to ease the burden, rather, of high cost of living currently witnessed in the country? Again, keep tweeting at NTV Kenya at Lubembe_Winnie. Remember to use the hashtag YourWorld and tell us how you feel about this whole thing and who should be held accountable. But like I said, if you want to call in, then feel free to do so. The numbers are down on your screen. Give us a call. Let's talk about this and, of course, possibly find solutions to the same. And, of course, we have Raphael Matu, who is an economist, helping us with the conversation. But before we delve deeper into the conversation, let's take a look at some of the feedback as far as Kiambu residents, a section of Kiambu residents, what they had to say as far as high cost of living is concerned. But before that, let's read some of your tweets. And Madenge Bernard says, reduce or halt the excessive tax on Kenyans. Multiplication of taxes is the cause of all these problems, starting with 60 shillings taxes on fuel. All right. And then someone else says, this is Mohammed Weli Inadan, who says, energy sector should be cheap and reliable. Kenya has a lot of potential in terms of sufficient, cheap and reliable electrical energy supply for industries. But unless issues like Kimarer is solved, hatuendi mbele. All right. And then Dickens Mugendi says, nothing we can do because this burden is from government. They're charging much on items to get money to sponsor their campaigns. God for us, Kenyans. All right. And then Wilson Boyd says, our leaders have the solution, but they are busy throwing blames on others and trying to clean themselves. Kenyans should vote wisely. And of course, what Raphael was talking about, our individual responsibilities as Kenyans, as a people, as far as electing leaders who we know have a track record and of course will deliver on their promises. All right, let's cross over to Kiambu and get to understand what some of the residents had to say as far as this whole aspect of high cost of living. Take a look.
Ukame ndio hasa inasababisha mambo uchumi uwe mkali kabisa katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Pia tumekuja katika ile season ya COVID ambapo wengine wetu waliadhimika sana na hawajaingia katika nafasi ambao walikuwa kitambo. Kwa hivyo ni kusema ya kwamba mambo ya COVID-19 imesababisha 100% ya bidhaa zetu ziwe juu. Vile vile tunasikia kwamba kuna vita katika nchi ya Russia na ambayo inategemea kubwa mafuta na gas, na labda hiyo inaweza pia sababisha.
You find that somebody has been receiving the same pay for quite a long time. some have been stagnating at the same place in their former places of employment, and this has made it very hard for them to make something better out of their lives. Yes, those people who are in any sector, that their pay should match with the cost of living.
Hii hali ya siasa, ule mkusanyiko na ule mtagusano wa siasa pande zote mbili, serikali na tuite upinzani, unapata kwamba kuna kule kutosikizana.
Hilo hali ya serikali kuongeza tax kwa vitu zile bidhaa ambazo mwananchi anahitaji, hiyo ndio kitu mmoja ambayo inaleta fanya uchumi wa nchi hii ama maisha, gharama ya maisha kupanda juu.
All right. Taxation, you know, still remains a big issue for so many Kenyans.
Yes.
And of course, the question is, why then tax some of these basic commodities that we need? And of course, you explained this a little bit earlier, but just in case someone missed that, can we just go through it very quickly so that it's easy for people to understand when the government introduces some of these taxes, the reason behind it?
Yeah, just so that I can be able to clarify the point I had said earlier, is also very important, maybe probably to understand the role of the government in the economy, and probably this could be some of the causes of the problems that we have been experiencing so far. You see that if you look at what was happening previously, we used to be under what we were calling as the structural adjustment programs, where as conditions given to us by the World Bank and the IMF, we kept the government was basically to keep off maybe from major sectors of the economy. But maybe probably from the NAC administration and moving to the new administration, there's a lot of government involvement in the economy. So the government normally comes in maybe to provide what more or less we call as public goods. We realize there's a lot of involvement. The government wants to be investing in infrastructure. We want to be there in free education. We want to have affordable secondary education. We want to talk about affordable or the universal health care.
Coverage,
It's important to realize that greater government involvement calls for greater government expenditures in the economy.
Right.
The more the government wants to come in so many sectors, and as we come in many sectors, the government does not really have its own money.
True.
So the money comes either from taxation or from borrowing. And in fact, borrowing is delayed taxation, because eventually we'll pay that money through taxation. So it's important to understand the more government involvement in economic activities, the more costly it becomes, and maybe probably we may need to think about other things like what may I say? We need to look maybe probably for other alternatives as a way of moving forward. But as I had said earlier, especially for basic commodities, I said why they are easy to look into is simply because they are easy to raise revenues. They are quite easy we normally say that they are quite inelastic. We look at sensitivity. You know, when you put a price on something, then it's possible that people will buy less and less of that commodity. But the way we are going to lose the ability of people to buy differs depending on the commodity. There are those things that we must consume. And like I gave examples, that is why like traditionally beer, cigarettes, you know, we call them as habit forming. So the same happens to basic commodities. They are things that we must use every day. So therefore they're very good for tax purposes. But like I said, the other side of the coin is that again, they have direct impact on the common Wanjiko. So a delicate balance here. You are trying to protect Wanjiko on the other side, and you are trying to mobilize resources, and resources can only be mobilized more heavily or more easily through those kind of commodities. Somebody also has talked about earning the same amount of money, but the cost of living is going up.
Really going high.
In fact, that is the biggest headache, that the incomes do not grow at the same rate as the tax. The taxes go higher, and all the cost of living rises at higher. So if you don't have alternative sources of revenues, or maybe what we call as the side hustles here and there, so you realize that instead of you becoming better, it's kind of you become worse off. Because if you could use 100 shillings to buy 2 loaves of bread, you now realize the
now,
100 shillings cannot.
yeah.
So in real sense, things become worse. So with an increase in the high cost of living, normally we talk about a decline in the standards of living. So people find themselves worse and worse off.
Than they were.
Yeah.
There's also another debate that I'm pretty sure you've had, and that is why not tax the richer more as compared to the common 190?
Why is there?
Why not tax the rich? Tax them higher,
okay.
Yes, as compared to the common 190, so that you travel somewhat, like you said, in terms of balancing act. Sometimes it can be very, very delicate. So why not tax the rich more?
I think when you talk about taxing the rich more, it depends on what kind of taxes that you're really talking about.
Okay.
Because you look at taxes on, if you look at income taxes, basically people at high levels of income, they pay more because we always need our taxation system is a progressive kind of system in terms of the incomes. So they basically pay more. So the fact that we are talking about basic commodities. Even these people, they use basic commodities. But what people try to argue out is why not go for luxuries? Maybe I think that is the one
I think.
Used, right?
But
luxurious commodities, we normally say that there are things we can do without. So if you can do without, by the simple mention, there are things we can do without. Put a tax on them. Let the price go up. So we opt not to buy them. So as an economic planner, you go back to the drawing board. So that is the contrast. Like I said, the policy contrasts between the way we may interpret it directly and the way things work. They are totally quite different.
There's also a debate about why not tax more on alcohol, so that we also reduce not only the intake of alcohol, but also so many cases of addiction, again, mental health and all those things. But again, I understand where you're coming from. Can we go back to agriculture?
Yes.
And of course, some might argue and say, but Kenya, we have the best weather, you know, for agriculture to thrive. But really, we're still seeing a case, like you said, where, yes, we're producing, but we're not producing enough. And again, all this can be tied down to policy issues, right? And regulation, you know, of the same, trying to keep the producer happy, but also the consumer happy. But right now, none of these people are happy. If anything, both of them are crying. For example, look at maize production, right? This high cost of production, for instance, like a bag of fertilizer right now goes for like over 7,000 shillings, which used to go for around 2,500, 3,000 shillings, right? Of course, that will have an effect in terms of then the money that we pay for the same. So then how best do we regulate this, just to make sure that the producer is happy, but the consumer is happy? There's no middlemen in between who come to exploit the farmers as well.
So I think to address challenges in the agricultural sector, because I see it is quite a delicate sector.
It really is,
we need to look at both the demand side and the supply side challenges. When you look at, let me talk about, like, for example, the demand. We have to address the issues of, like, of course, our population has quite grown
as well,
and is not something that we can wish away. So the demand for the products are quite high. But when you look at our supply, what has been happening, especially to our land, and maybe we look back, especially in the rural areas. Traditionally, why is, again, is also becoming a big bite, you know. We used to complain about unga in the urban centers. Now when we are crying, even people in the villages are crying.
Absolutely.
Why? Because most of them, again, you also realize they don't produce sufficient food for themselves, you know. Those early days, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people in the village would have at least some sufficient, let's call it subsistent production. But what has happened is that again, due to population pressure, we have also subdivided our pieces of land. We keep on subdividing. Of course, there are some places whereby we cannot subdivide the land anymore. The family land is the size of this studio, so that means
you cannot
we put one house here. Then now again they have to jipanga, right? So what used to be most productive land, maybe part of it has been used for settlement, and you realize that as pieces of land become smaller and smaller, then we get what we call diminishing returns. So there's nothing much we are really getting from that land, and that is why you realize when we are crying in the urban centers, even people in the villages, they're also feeling it. Unlike when we used to have a smaller portion of the urbanites feeling the pain of the cost of living, when most people in the rural areas could really be able to supply. So we need to think about policies which address maybe probably our land use, and I think the other bigger picture is to think about large-scale production, where we can be able to produce sufficient food that will be able to cater for the fast-growing population, of course, with more modern technologies. You have talked about the cost of production in agriculture. I think it's something that, again, also need to be addressed, because you realize that, and especially, again, people who are not doing it so much on large scale, they cannot meet the costs. So maybe you go to dairy and you realize you are struggling with feeds, and you are doing zero work, so eventually you are bad on, maybe you're doing poultry and so many other things. So they're addressing the cost of production in agriculture, again, could be something that we need to address. We need to address our land policy in terms of land use, and we also have to address issues to deal with the cost of production in agriculture.
Exactly. Because again, I come from Trans Nzoia, and of course it's usually like large scale farming, especially for maize. And I remember a few years ago, like 5-7 years ago, of course the production was really, really high. We would plant maize, have enough for ourselves, and have a lot to sell, right? And even the pricing at that time was really, really good. So really buying a bag of fertilizer versus given what you're selling, you know, after, you know, production and all those things, it was fairly good. And a lot of people ventured into the same. But fast forward to now, a lot of people have opted to look for other things, you know, that they can either plant. So plant just a little bit of maize to sustain themselves, and then try and look for something else to also. So this shift, you know, by so many farmers, do you think this is one of the things that is actually contributing to where we are now, and especially as far as pricing of some of those things?
Yeah, part of what I've just said, you see, is there what you have talked about, abandoning what maybe probably used to work on is another factor. I have talked about the lands becoming smaller, and productivity becomes not tenable. And we have also now talked about the cost of production, whereby you have been producing,
very,
but you
high.
now realize that the kind of investments you're doing is not really giving any return. So you find, again, abandonment, and again, that still goes back to the overall output. So the moment the output is low, the demand is still high, because people must still eat. So the prices continue to move up.
And there's also a question of exploitation of farmers, where you'd find this brokers, right, who come in, and of course mess up with the entire pricing, because again, the farmer who has put in a lot of work into producing, you know, the food that we need, they're not gaining, they're not getting the profit that they deserve. If anything, this person who's never been to a farm, never understands the whole aspect of production, comes in, someone detects the price, and end up, you know, somewhat kufinyilia, you know, this farmer. So that aspect of then exploitation, which, like you said, boils down to a case of policy issue. Then what do we do to make these farmers happy? If anything, just make them go back to producing, you know, what they were producing initially, so that, again, we have some bit of, you know, when it comes to like food security in the country, we're somewhat protected.
Yeah, so I think, as you have just said, we go back to policy. And so far, I think I'm a bit happy about what has been happening in the agricultural sector, maybe the last 1 year or so. Especially in the tea sector, in the milk industry, even I think in the coffee industry, because most of the biggest challenge, of course, we have had for the farmer is also, again, access to the markets. And when farmers cannot access the markets, that is where the middlemen come in. And when the middlemen come in, they want to exploit everything. So it's like they take almost everything, and then farmers have nothing to take home. So again, you realize that there's some things you cannot really be able to work on unless they have to go through policy. And therefore, when we have the right policies, then we can be able to take the right actions against people.
I'm really curious to understand, when you talk about the right policy, what exactly does that mean? What needs to be done? For example, a case of like the tea sector, right? Initially, of course, the regulation and management was done by a totally different entity. And it got to a point where they were like, fine, so you farmers, make sure you manage this so that it works for you. And we've seen that it has worked somewhat quite well for them. So do you think that then that needs to be translated into other sectors in the agriculture? Let the farmers manage themselves and see if we will notice a difference.
I think it should, and I think over and above that, it is good also to build capacity. For these people to be able to make decisions. And it is also important that in that capacity building, the matter of corporate governance, for them to understand why following the law, normal procedures, following all the procedures in terms of everything that is needed to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And the resources, they manage their own resources in a better way is very, very important. Because what has happened is in some scenarios when we find the same farmers getting compromised by the same people who come into the industry.
Yes.
So when we say that we now need a change, we need to change the board of governance, we need to change the management team and whatever, they will just come in and influence a few guys, and you find like it is the same people who have been there coming back, and nothing is becoming better. So it is important that you enlighten and you empower people even from the grassroots, so that as they make the decisions, they understand what stakes do they have here and what is their role in terms of proper management. The other thing is, of course, is even for people even in the urban centers, let's go back also from where we come from and try to give our people on the ground, try to give them some support.
That's true.
Because from where I come from, we produce coffee, and again we still have some kind of management issues. And challenges. But at times when you go there and you try to enlighten people, to inform them, that awareness maybe makes all the difference.
Empowerment of the same people. There's also a question of import. And remember, we talked about earlier on that sometimes it's just sad that we have to import some of these basic commodities that can be locally produced or manufactured in the country. You know, I remember that person was really, really angry that I can produce toothpicks, but we are still, you know, importing them. One of the things that brought about a huge debate was maize, again, imported from, you know, neighboring countries, and they are way, way cheaper. And the maize that is produced in the country is a bit expensive. So there's that you know, a bit of tussle. Why are we importing them and then selling them at a cheaper price? And yet we have a lot. Remember, there was a time they were actually going bad, you know, as far as the maize produced in the country is actually going bad. The farmers are counting losses. And yet we're importing others, you know, and selling them at a cheaper price. So then this aspect of imports, again, how do we regulate this to make sure that, yes, in as much as the ones that we have in the country locally produced are not sufficient, yes, we can still import, but still make these two people happy, right? How do we do that? How do we regulate the same?
So one of the ways that we try to regulate imports is maybe probably by placing quotas, or maybe probably not in terms of quotas, maybe probably also imposing the taxes on maybe probably imported products. But remember, as we do that, then it means that whatever is being supplied locally should be able to compete with what is being brought from outside. And this one is not just to the agricultural products, even to the manufactured goods, because at times, generally, we talk about protecting the local industries. And especially, you need to look at the quality, especially for manufactured goods. People will have no problem importing expensive commodities as long as they are better quality as compared to what is being locally here. So in simple language, people just say, no, let's put import taxes and we have protected the local industry. It does not always work like that. We have to make sure that we have improved the quality of the products so that the imported
locally
goods,
produced,
they are also able to compete fairly with the imported goods. Otherwise, as long as we don't improve on our quality for the local products, then people will continue to import, even when we have put taxes on the commodities. Apart from maybe the issue of quotas and the import taxes. And remember, this one should also affect, especially in the construction industry. We have had a lot of complaints again. Why are we not really engaging the local constructors, right? So the question is, the quality of work that we get from them, is it fairly comparable to what we are getting from people who are working for us from outside? So it is important that to understand, if people have to be protected by the government, they must also protect themselves by giving us better quality so that it can compete fairly with imported goods. But again, when we talk about importation of certain products, I also want to believe that partly there could be some people who may not want things maybe to work smoothly locally, so that they can take advantage of imports, especially those who are in business. So you don't want the cost to be low, you don't want the processes locally to be efficient for reasons because maybe you are enjoying what is being imported, and maybe that is how you're doing business. So you realize all those things cannot really be overlooked.
Yeah, of course, the subject of morality then comes to play, because I was listening to someone who was saying, at the end of the day, we should go back to morals. Why are we doing this? And especially to, for example, our farmers, why are we doing this to them? They're suffering, and yet we are gaining, from the import. So I see what you're saying. And also then, can we talk about then a question of storage, again, which has been a big issue, right, in the country? Are farmers not empowered enough as far as then storage? Yes, produce bumper harvest, which we have seen, a number of times. But then again, when it comes to storage, is where there's a big issue that some of this produce actually go to waste because they're not properly stored.
Yeah, storage, like I said, agriculture faces all these issues. We have addressed the issue of marketing. Maybe farmers not really be able to access our markets. We have talked about the issue of costs, and storage becomes another problem, because you see, if you produce the harvest, and most of it, I said agriculture, the harvest is unpredictable. So at times we find ourselves all of a sudden the bumper harvest have just come in.
And we don't know what to do with them.
Producing, that means, of course, the market is narrower. So we need to have a way that this output can be stored in a way that we can sell it tomorrow when the supply is not as high and the prices are not as poor. And that is the difference usually between agricultural sector and the industrial sector. That in the industry, if the prices were to be poor, we don't have to sell now. Things cannot go back, so they cannot go bad. So we can still sell them tomorrow. But in agriculture, especially the nature that most of the commodities are perishable, so we have to get them rid of them even at very, very poor prices. So it is very important that we adopt modern technologies. We get to facilitate how farmers can be able to store their products, so that, of course, in fact, when we have the capacity to store, that means that we can stabilize the prices very easily, because when supply is very high, we don't have to sell at the weird poor prices. So we can keep the products. And when supply is low, like now we are talking about drought, the same product can now be made available to the market. In fact, being able to store agricultural products, especially the perishable products, if we have the proper technology to do that, then it is one way of making sure that the prices remain stable throughout.
And do you think it's time that we rethink or try to find alternatives? For example, like we said, maize production now is just becoming an issue. Some farmers opting not to produce the same. Do you feel then it's time for us to rethink? For example, the maize farmers could plant something else. But then again, there's that question of then what happens to our staples, right? But is it time that we rethink that in terms of finding alternatives so that we can still stay afloat and still have enough food in the country? Probably find something else that works very well or does very well in certain climatic conditions, so that in as much as, yes, so maize is not doing very well, for example, this season, we still have something else, for example, like cassava or, like bananas, just something to somewhat, subsidize on what we're having.
So I think this diversification is not really a problem. It's good to encourage people to produce different kind of products. And especially even when you talk about some arid and semi-arid areas where we may think about like drought-resistant crops. Also encouraging even people who are in those kind of areas. Most of them, you realize they are pastoralists. We have seen now people going to irrigation. I think I was reading an article on irrigation and all this in Turkana or somewhere. So it is still possible that we can do other things. We can always be able to diversify. The only big challenge, as we said, is that you realize that almost like in agricultural production, the challenges are almost similar. Yeah, they are more similar in all sectors. So I think that is why we are saying it is important that even as we talk about diversification, we make sure that at least things are running. There are proper guidelines, there are proper policies. We don't want to go direct to really control it, because especially it is almost impossible to have price controls for agricultural commodities. We cannot really wake up today and talk about like we must sell a bag of potatoes at 2,000 shillings. That really cannot happen. Because, and especially even like Sukuma Wiki, how do you really, with Mama Mboga there in the Kibanda, how do you really control the prices for Sukuma Wiki, the prices for onions? That really does not happen. But maybe for cereals, when things get out of hand, we can always talk about what we call our stabilization funds, whereby when farmers produce their crop, we give them a guarantee. Like, for example, if because you see, we have said people are quitting producing. So if you produce a bag of wheat, maybe using stabilization funds, we can tell you if you supply, for example, to the cereals board, maybe we can set a price of, say, a minimum of 3,000 shillings. Per farmer. You realize that it's normal. Maybe the market price could be far much lower than the 3,000 shillings. But as long as you're supplying to the board, then you're guaranteed about the 3,000. So meaning that the fund will help to top up the price, and that maybe probably in the past has been one of the methods that have been used to try to work with the stabilization funds. And what happens is that even when you're working with the stabilization funds, in cases like the prices in the industry, they happen to be higher than what you had really expected, we don't keep that. Of course, you still give the farmers.
Exactly.
The most crucial thing is to make sure that a price does not fall beyond a certain point.
Yeah, that then the farmers, of course, feel the pinch, of the same, and then forcing them to, like we said earlier on, opt for other things, right?
Yeah, but when you stabilize the prices now is a motivation that you are guaranteed as long as you're supplying at this price. Is a minimum price that is a good price. Yeah, but again, you also realize the government must pump in a lot of money. And what happens, again, the challenges with the stabilization funds is that when the harvest is bumper, like there are so many people and the prices are too low, so you have a very big margin you have to offset. Maybe the bag is selling only at 1,500 shillings. So it means that you have to top up per bag 1,500 shillings. Maybe you need a lot of money, maybe probably to put up. So again, it goes towards, again, availability of funding. Yeah, but in the past, it has worked as a way of maybe, especially for guys producing cereals, has worked as a way of trying to stabilize the prices.
So should we go back? That's the question, all right? But we're taking a break right now. Of course, when we come back, we'd also understand the aspect of shilling, and then, so fine, understanding all these aspects and how they contribute to where we are at right now, then what needs to be done, right? And is the situation getting worse or not? Those are some of the questions that, of course, we'll be seeking answers to, but keep tweeting at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. Like I said, you want to call in live and also chime into the conversation of the day. You are allowed to do so. The numbers are down on your screen. But, of course, all that is coming up after this short break. Stay with us. This is your world.
As Dr. Funiken Momakayai hosts unscripted true-life relationship experiences on reality TV show Kupatana. Nia, Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. and Kupatana every Tuesday and Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Terms and conditions apply.
For 6. Did you say 6? Fungua app. Ding dong, double. Your favorite moment.
Now your favorite ice cream.
Ding dong, double.
It's so good.
Order what you want to select what you want.
Ding dong, double. Order it now. Download the app, order a Glovo, and we get it.
Ding dong, double.
At the first sign of pain, you need a solution that you can trust. Try Panadol Advance. With Panadol's Optizode formula, the tablet absorbs quickly and starts providing fast and effective pain relief you can trust. Try Panadol Advance.
I'm growing up, I'm growing into every moment.
Thanks, Mom.
So if I
Nurture the moment with Minute Maid Delight. Now available in tropical, orange, mango and apple flavors.
Alfresh, maziwa kamili asili ya Kenya.
All right, welcome back. Last phase of the show, time flies, but of course here we are trying to understand how did we get here really as far as high cost of living is concerned. And of course, Raphael Matu, who is an economist, really making it easy for us to understand and getting to know what role, first of all, we play as a people, other than just, pointing fingers at the government, at the leaders. What role have we played, we as common wananchi, to be where we are at today? But of course, the question is then, what needs to be done to ease the high cost of living that we are experiencing currently in the country? What should be done to ease the burden of high cost of living currently witnessed in the country is the question that we're asking you today. Again, keep tweeting at NTV Kenya, at Lubembe_Winnie. Let's go through some of this feedback. And at N. Mudhomi says, the blame game should stop. Let all leaders agree on a solution to reduce the cost of living. Every leader has his followers, but we are all suffering in general. So it is them. So it's them. I agree. I like to vote to any leader with my belly full. All right. And then at CK Mutuku_ says, subsidize farm inputs. That's all. Provide loans to farmers. Let's make agriculture the priority so that we stop importing food. Right now, transport is too expensive due to world oil prices. And then at Cardis says, reclaim stolen monies, use it to subsidize basic commodities, including food and agriculture additives. Okay. And then at Real Dudubi says, inject to the economy any monies belonging to Kenyans in offshore accounts. Take back land over 1,000 acres. Okay. And then someone else says, this is at Polska. Says, get rid of all new taxes introduced by the current government. Simple as that. And then at Mjanja Muigai says, reduce the price of fuel, which will reflect in the cost of production and thus price of commodities. And the question is it as easy as, Kenyans are expecting reduce the price of fuel right now? Is it as easy?
I don't think it's as easy, or maybe probably as straightforward as it is, because like I said, it is really a delicate balance.
Yes.
Remember, we are struggling as Kenyans, and we are struggling together with the government that is also equally struggling. Yeah. So we are more or less in the same breath. But I still think that moving forward, maybe there are things that maybe can be done in the short run, or maybe just some short-term solutions. Others, they can only happen in the long run, because you see, we are talking about the prices now, or what is really happening today in terms of the food prices. And this is about a month ago, we had the hashtag on lower the food prices. Yeah. I don't think we can go to price controls, and because price controls at times, that one cannot work in terms of products that are already produced and they're already in the market. I cannot just wake up today and tell you that you must sell bread
certain
at 50 shillings, yet
yeah.
you have it in your kiosk already, you bought it at 55 shillings, and somebody said he needs to add 5 shillings.
Yeah, if they add 60. 5, we add 5 as well.
Yeah, he said that. So it's not really possible, because we need to understand that we don't just think about ourselves as consumers, we also have to think about the producers. So the role of the government is to protect both the consumers and the producers. So I don't think price controls can work for now. In terms of subsidies, yes, maybe probably we may need to subsidize, but more so maybe products in the agricultural sector, as maybe somebody has just said on the tweet, so that we can try to lower the cost of production or the cost of agricultural products. And once the prices maybe go down, cutting down the taxes, I think that was the key issue. You need also to understand that as we talk about lowering the tax, we must admit, yes, of course, we have quite
high taxation.
High taxes, especially on fuel and on the basic commodities. Maybe that is a challenge. Maybe probably the government may have to take, no matter how maybe probably painful it is. I know it could be a painful action on the side of the government, but I think that one can be done. But we also need to remember, I think, as part of the conditionalities given to us by World Bank and as way of trying to mobilize revenues, I think imposing of VAT on fuel is one of the requirements that is there. In terms of long-term solutions, I think that is why we have said probably modernization in terms of agricultural productivity and trying to look at whether we can be able to do it on a large scale so that we don't rely so much on importation. Apart from that, it will also be important, maybe probably moving forward, also trying to work towards the stabilization of the shilling. As we have said, in fact, importation is one of the biggest challenges that we have. So if you look at how much it costs to import when the shilling is almost hitting 115 shilling, that is to the dollar, is quite costly. So, and that one again calls for an increase in the interest rates. So at times when we raise the interest rates, we attract foreign investors, and maybe probably by doing that, you realize that our shilling may gain traction.
A bit stable,
But again, you also realize certain policies will also come with what maybe at times we call as give and take. So what implications will the rise in interest rates have, maybe probably again in terms of our local investments and so forth. So is usually, like I said, is quite a delicate balance.
Really
some of playing around with some of these variables. For agriculture, I think the immediate term, I don't think there's nothing much we can do. Maybe the rains have come, and hopefully we hope that everything gets down now, as maybe especially for vegetables and other products which will come up in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks time. So in the short term in the agriculture, there is nothing much we can do. But so for long term, you're cutting down the cost of production and others. There are things we need to refocus. Remember, we talked about land policy use earlier, which is also very core for us to be able to move forward. Trying to, there's somebody who has talked about what trying to bring the money that is
offshore accounts, bring them back.
Bring them back. I think that is quite more of is an issue that has hit the political headlines. But I think, to my view, I don't think that is really a solution, because when you have your money, I think you can decide where you really want to invest it. And at times, maybe it is maybe overstated, or at times it is over-exaggerated, maybe through the political framework. So maybe I don't think we have that legal framework, unless maybe the money which is stolen, which is taken there, that one, of course, we should be able to bring it back. And I think there are efforts to do that, especially for certain, in certain countries where we know that money that was lost through corruption was put up there. But I think for people who have invested their genuine money, I don't think we can really force them to bring the money back home.
All right, it's up to them to decide, like you said, where they want to invest their monies. But of course, one of the biggest things, and of course we were talking about this earlier on, is an aspect of corruption and mismanagement of funds, really, because there's also a question of we are over-borrowing in the country as of now. And someone was asking, do we really need that much borrowing? I mean, don't we have, not enough, but substantial amounts of local revenue that can at least push us as far as development is concerned? And then when we're borrowing, we don't just borrow too much, and then the money is mismanaged, and then here we are today. So that aspect of debt management and corruption and over borrowing, of course, there's still the debate of where our debt is. It at 8 trillion, or is it 11 trillion? Again, we've had this from these two political sides. So let's just address that corruption and how it trickles down to what we're experiencing today and what's need to be done, and especially when it comes to management of funds.
Yeah, I think when everything is said and done, corruption is the elephant in the room. And that is what we should be thinking on how to address. Because as you have just said, even when you look at our levels, when we get to the level whereby the government is raising taxes, maybe in an effort to meet its budgetary deficits. Some of those deficits, maybe they're raising purely because of the mismanagement of public funds. When you talk about borrowing, and some of the deficits, again, coming as a result of corruption, and also given the fact that some money we borrowed, we never invested, and therefore we are not getting any returns
from the same,
right? Meaning that it could have been generating some revenue to the country, and we don't have that revenue. So again, we move from a bad situation, then we go back probably to our situation. So I think the focus on how we manage our resources is the key item, just within the national government and also within the county government.
Like you said earlier on, we have these committees, which again, I had someone asking, do we really need all these committees? Because at the end of the day, nothing is done. If anything, our situation is getting worse by the day. Some of the people who, again, are in these committees are, again, accused of corruption and all those things. So do we really need all those things? So should we have, I don't know, like just Kenyans come up with like an oversight authority, you know, aside from the ones that are currently present, so that we just put these people, you know, or hold them accountable as far as you said this, but this is not done. You borrowed this much money, nothing has been done for the, should we do that? Or what role then do we have? Because remember, like we said earlier on, it's very easy for us to point fingers, right? But then again, what are we doing, right? So individual contributions, really, as far as making sure we hold these people accountable, but also make sure that we are somewhat cushioned from, you know, the high cost of living that we are experiencing right now. What do we do as common wananchi now?
Yeah, I must admit that one of the challenges that we have again as a country is the ballooning wage bill. We have really a huge wage bill. And that means that most of the revenues that we get, most of the revenue goes to recurrent rather than going to the expenditures. So that one has contributed again towards deficit, even as we talk about the corruption, which is maybe key item, even as we talk about things like population growth rate, which again has pushed the government. I think earlier I talked about also greater government involvement in terms of the economic activities. It also calls for a lot of resources to be used. But more so if we talk about oversight, because Parliament, as we said, is supposed to make legislation, and we're supposed to do the oversight. I must agree, as you have said, maybe we have people sitting in those committees, earning a lot of allowances, and maybe probably the contribution they're making is completely zero. And I think this is where I said we go back to Anjiko. You are the voter. So as you make your vote, you know, at times we look at political contests, maybe just like a contest between Man U and Arsenal or Chelsea and whatever, and we cheer on. But the difference between the political contests that we are seeing and people are cheering on, in fact others are so angry with others, you must realize that we must think beyond what happens on 9th of August. In economics, we say we must think beyond stage 1, right? Most people, they are thinking up to stage 1. So we just want to be excited. Our team is winning up to 9th of August.
And then what happens after?
What happens beyond stage 1?
Is the big question that we need to ask ourselves.
And that is why you have talked about, because we have talked about corruption and we have talked about the mismanagement of public resources already. And we have talked about the policy framework that needs to be done. There's no way we are going to have a good education system. There's no way we are going to have a good agricultural system or agricultural economy. There's no way things are going to work in manufacturing and everywhere else if we don't have the right policies. And you realize, as we have seen, most of these processes have to go through the legislative processes. And whether it's the elected leaders who are coming up with ideas, whether it's the general public who are getting the ideas and pushing them through the elected leaders, whether it's the NGOs and the community-based organizations which are coming up with ideas. They must have a channel through which they can push these laws and policies. So mostly they go through our elected leaders.
Yeah.
So it is important, and we keep on emphasizing, very important, that people we put into those positions, they are people who understand what those positions entail, people who are ready to serve, people who are ready to sacrifice, people who are leaders, and not just people who are there simply because they want, in Kenya,
they want some position of
political
power.
position has become a way of getting rich. If you want to get rich, you have to go running for a political position. So it must be people who want to serve, people who want to lead this country. Let's not look at stage one as just winning the game on there. So I think in terms of the other part we need to do is let's empower the oversight bodies. There are several bodies which have different responsibilities. So we build a stronger institutional framework, because if you have proper institutions and especially events, the independent bodies that we talked about, if we can be able to empower institutions, then as a country we can be able to move forward. You realize, like, if you look at developed countries like the US, the fact that of course we have a running government, the role of independent institutions is very, very cool.
Very cool.
And that is why even in terms of transition, maybe they are never worried as long as we gone through elections, have we been able to declare the results. We are not worried about transitions because the relevant institutions will do the relevant, the respective
mandate.
So, yeah. So in terms of running the country, in terms of oversight, in terms of prosecution of people engaged in corruption and so forth, I think it is important that we strongly empower our institutions. And when you empower them, it's not just by providing the resources, but also even strengthening the legal framework under which these institutions operate.
I think the independence part is where there's a big problem, but I like what you're saying. Just empower them, give them the independence that they need to do their job, and then of course we'll see
them the
results.
resources, and also make sure that they are strongly protected under the legal framework. Because at times we have seen scenarios whereby as they try to work, they also meet serious legal handles ahead.
Yes. Okay, and then we also had, feedback, especially from people from Bomet. Remember, we talked to different people from different parts of the country as far as what we're experiencing right now. But Bomet is not ready. The question is then again, do you see this? Do you see that this situation will continue then for a longer time? Because like he said, some of these things Kenyans expect reduce the prices now. But of course, what we're saying is it's not as easy as just giving a word and say, hey, reduce the price of sugar, reduce the price of bread, reduce the price of milk. It's not as easy as that, right? So do you foresee a scenario where we'll be in this situation maybe for a longer period of time?
So things may be better or things may be worse, depending on how we move on from where we are.
Where we are now.
Yeah, because as we said, we have been able to analyze the factors that have brought us to where
we are today.
We have talked about challenges in the agricultural sector. We have talked about matters regarding the exchange rates. We have talked about the taxes on fuel and basic commodities and so forth. So moving forward, what actions are we likely to take? And of course, as we have said, there are areas where maybe probably we may not need immediate actions, like we have said in agriculture, and especially when you're talking about very basic commodities. There's nothing that really can be done in the immediate term. So those things will stabilize themselves. But in regarding to maybe things on taxes, whether the government will really be willing to push itself a bit harder and maybe see whether we can be able to do a bit of adjustment on taxes, especially on basic commodities and fuel prices. I think that is something that we may need to see what kind of decisions maybe probably they may want to make. As we have said, is very delicate. You're trying to struggle with the revenue mobilization on one side, and you're trying to talk about social protection on the other side. As regarding the the shilling to the dollar, so we don't know how long, because we need to understand what factors really bring about the weakening of the shilling to the dollar. Because apart from the demand for our goods and services by people out there, we need to think about matters on political stability, and especially now that we are moving towards elections. We'll expect a bit of maybe visitors in terms of tourists, or of course slowing down as we go to the electioneering period. You know, it's a period of wait and see. We don't really expect it's the time for most investors to be running to the country, so maybe they may be holding on. So that one may stay there maybe for quite some time. Regarding the one Ukraine and Russia, so again, we don't know how that is gonna go, and our hope is only that it doesn't escalate to a global kind of conflict in terms of war. Of course, already in terms of the economy is already a conflict.
We're already affected,
but in terms of war, we hope it doesn't exaggerate to that level. So it depends on how we're going to move from there. But in terms of agricultural commodity, I think there's hope things may change. But I think it's also important. There are some places where things are a bit tight. I think the government should give more support. It's unfortunate to hear that there are some people who are dying because they don't have food. We have seen people losing their livelihood, especially on the northeastern. So I think more resources need to be put into there. I think what the government can do maybe probably to slow down on maybe things that are not urgent, and maybe probably try to translate resources and try to address the more urgent things, like especially the issue of food is something that is critical.
Very critical, and especially in the north. And thing is, as a country, we're known to be like a knee-jerk, you know, kind of country where we wait until something happens, and then that is where we quickly run to find solutions. I mean, a case in point, the issue of drought, it's not new. Has been here for a very long time. People are dying every single day, and right now, again, some of the stories that we read, it's just sad to see children don't have food, you know, that they have to then try and do like a balancing act. Whatever the children are eating is what we're also feeding to the animals, so that, again, try to preserve them. So in thinking about like long-term solutions, especially when it comes to this case of drought in the country, where in 2022, nobody should be dying because they do not have food, right? And an aspect of also priority in the country. I like what you're saying. The government should slow down on the things that are not urgent and focus on the things that are urgent, right? But long term, like next year, we do not want to hear a case of people still dying because there's drought. What needs to be done, and especially when it comes to like a long-term solution, really, starting with drought, for example.
As you have said, it's unfortunate up to this time that we are still talking about the serious effects of drought. Of course, we don't have control over drought, but I think we have control in terms of planning. So what our plans are, because in fact, it's like almost this cycle comes in after every 2-3 years. Is something that, of course,
and it's like extremes. At one point we have drought, and at some point we have floods.
So I think it's important that we have plans, and when we have also challenges like now, like we have said, let's set aside resources maybe probably that go to address especially those people who are seriously going through those challenges. Let's also, and more so trying to manage especially the distribution part of it, because I think probably some of the food may have already been dispatched, but how efficient are the distribution processes, because it does not really add value if money arrives, food arrives when somebody has already died. So it is the food is meant to save life, so it should get there before the situation gets worse. So they need to streamline their distribution processes. I think it will be very, very important. And as we have said, even to other people, we may not be in the drought side, but the cost of living is still high. So it's important. Is it possible to really go slow, maybe on things that are not urgent, and maybe try to see, is it possible maybe to sacrifice and cut maybe the taxes, even if it's minimal, so that at least we can arrest, even if maybe probably maybe the prices don't go down, maybe even depending on what is happening globally, we can try to maintain maybe the prices as where they are.
All right, let's take a bit of feedback, and then I'll come back for your passing shot, because we need to end the show in the next like 2 minutes or so. So let's hear what you had to say as far as the question of the day. So Joseph Muiruri says the government should lower taxes on basic consumer items in the interim. Long term, let the government lower taxes on farm inputs. Exactly what you're saying. And then Shadim Murray says, chase away any politician talking politics while people are suffering. Okay. And Moses Yator says, number 1, remove cartels in every sector. Number 2, remove Auditor General. Number 3, stop corruption in public offices. And number 4, monitor CS's spending. All right. And then at Al-Kadero Anjama, says the government has all the powers to ease the burden, but the cartels controls the government. All right. So as we close, Raphael, really, and as far as just bringing this whole conversation together, given what the people are saying as far as what needs to be done, you know, to just somewhat like salvage the situation, and of course just understanding where we are at and moving forward, what do we do now? Do we just survive and see as we wait things to be done? What would you say?
I think maybe probably just to comment on the last tweet which I've seen there about cartels, and we mentioned about them. The most unfortunate thing is that some of these cartels could be in the politicians who we are really talking about. So it becomes a bit difficult, because even as how do you legislate and how do you oversight, and you're also a player in the same industry or in the same sector. So at times that is where maybe probably challenges may come in. But moving forward, because the cost of living is high, it's important that people try to live within their means. And that means, of course, we set priorities. We understand especially the kids will be, for example, going back to school in the next 3 weeks. We have had almost 7 weeks, right? Yeah, but it's never too late when we get our incomes. We don't have to wait until maybe, in fact, they'll be going back to school in the date 20-something, which is, we normally say the money is in a corner. So it's good people try to pay up. Whatever small you get, try to reduce your burden on school fees. Avoid, maybe try to manage your resources, and don't try to manage money when you have it in cash, because when you have money in cash, it is not manageable. So make sure that the moment you get money, you divert it to these things. Try to look at cheaper sources of purchases. You don't have to insist you must buy brand new uniform and whatever. You have time. You can always source. You can get second-hand items, including uniform, including books, including other things which are relatively cheaper, so that of course you can be able to cut on the budget. So it is important that people strictly remain into their budgets as we look for the way forward. It is important to avoid those luxurious spending, which maybe probably are not really called for. And it is very important that we try not to manage money in cash or in pesa, or try to put, you will still spend. So whatever small you get, pay a bit of fees. Don't wait for you to get all the school fees.
So that
pay
you
bit
make
by
the
bit.
payments.
By the time maybe the kids are going back to school, you're almost there. Maybe try to shop around, get things which are affordable, which the kids need as they go back to school.
Okay.
And
so basically
overall, they should also always try to do something extra beyond normal,
what you're
and
getting.
especially most of the side hustle, you can get away or two of earning an extra coin.
I hear you. I hear you. And I love that, you know, powerful message about just try as much as possible to live within your means, avoid the luxuries for now, and we'll be good. We'll be good, even as we wait to see how things will pan out as far as the high cost of living. Raphael Matu, we cannot say thank you enough. Thank you so much for coming by today. Very, very insightful conversation that we had, really, as far as the high cost of living. And now we understand where we are at, what roles we have played, and what we need to do to make sure that, again, we just survive as we wait for things to pan out. But we have to end the show right here. And right now, I believe that you've learned a lot. My name is Winnie Lubembe. And of course, special thank you to Raphael Matu, who is an economist. And not forgetting a very big team behind us who put together the show and made sure that it is a success. We say thank you. God bless. Have yourselves a lovely day ahead. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Your World. Same time, same place. Goodbye for now.